Ignite your curiosity with Austin Next. We're watching Austin transform from a thriving ecosystem into a global superstar. With our host, Jason Scharf, we aspire to better comprehend the true nature of innovation. Together, we will uncover what makes a successful ecosystem and navigate the technologies shaping our future. Now let's dive into what's next.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Austin Private Wealth, a registered investment advisor focused on fee-only financial planning and investment management. Their mission is to serve affluent clients with personalized financial advice, fostering a trusted relationship that will endure for generations to come. Austin Private Wealth is not just about managing wealth. They're about inspiring you to embrace a future filled with possibilities and helping you architect enduring legacies. Their core values of integrity, service, caring, excellence, and growth are at the heart of everything they do. Connect with them today at austinprivatewealth.com.
Austin Private Wealth is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Austin Private Wealth and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advice may be rendered by Austin Private Wealth unless a client service agreement is in place. Investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
I think that every person we've interviewed on the podcast has mentioned talent as a key issue facing Austin, as it quickly ramps up its innovation ecosystem. And a big part of that is developing mid-level managers that can make decisions and propel businesses forward. Today, we're joined by someone who's in the midst of that process. Bjorn Billhardt is CEO of Abilitie. The company develops emerging business leaders with team-based business simulations, global facilitators, and seasoned implementation teams. Abilitie's leadership programs have educated over 20,000 learners across the world, including high-potential employees at companies like GE, Southwest Air, Pfizer, Marriott, and Coca-Cola. Before founding Abilitie in 2015, Bjorn worked as a consultant and corporate trainer for Baan, the Dutch software company, and McKinsey, the management consulting firm. He holds a BA from the University of Texas at Austin and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Bjorn lives in Austin with his wife and 3 young boys. A native of Hamburg, Germany, he came to the United States as an exchange student in high school.
Bjorn, welcome to the Austin Next Show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off. Can you take a moment and describe Abilitie?
Yeah, we are a corporate leadership development company, and our flagship is a 12-week mini MBA called the Invited MBA. And we are our vision is a better educated world with more equitable access to opportunity. And the idea is really to educate people in a way that it's not being served by the traditional business schools these days.
So one of the things, and as you said, the gap where traditional business schools, Texas has a number of 2-year and 4-year colleges, almost 90 in the state. How does Abilitie kind of fit into the higher ed matrix and ecosystem?
Yeah, we are not out to replace any of the 2 or 4-year colleges. We're really, our market is after you've graduated from college and you're wondering, should I get an advanced degree? Should I get an MBA? The question that people have is, I feel like I'm doing well in business, maybe in a career where you're growing, you've or you may not be in a business career. You may have you may be in nursing or in other areas, and you're like, well, if I just take this 2-year MBA, then my career will accelerate. But it's $100,000. Do I take it? And so we want to provide an alternative to that.
So where do you tend to see? You kind of started with the people who are entering the program. What kind of roles and opportunities do they end up graduating into?
Yeah, so what we offer is a mini MBA. It is an accelerated program. It is not the value proposition is very different. It's less than $2,000, so it's really kind of a booster shot, if you will. That allows people to understand what they need to know to become a leader in the business world. And what we found is that a lot of people are using our program and our mini MBA to either get an internal promotion. So we've had a ton of people that have been promoted internally and that have been promoted to a managerial position, to sometimes kind of a business leader position, or they're looking at it to kind of create a signal to future employers that, hey, I'm interested in more. I maybe a full-time programmer or a full-time, content writer in marketing, but I'm ready to take a business leadership role. And oftentimes, right now you have to sort of go through this 2-year curriculum just to signal to employers that you're ready for that, right? And we are kind of that alternative, the more cost-effective and time-effective alternative. So we've seen people, obviously switch jobs. We've seen actually we have this mentor program, and we have these advisors, and we actually have seen someone take a job with one, right? And so you network, you get to know people, and we are an Austin-based program. So while it is now virtual, and it's we have people dialing in from all over the world, we are very Austin-centric still, and so our happy hours are all organized in Austin, and so you really do get to become part of this network and community when you go through our experience.
And so that's one of the great things that we've kind of noticed about Austin. I think it separates it from other innovation ecosystems is the diversity and of types of jobs and the ability to really create and support middle-class jobs. You have, the traditional high-end kind of tech workers and programmers. You have high-end manufacturing at the Tesla plant, at Samsung. We're hearing about Ford possibly coming here, and all of the support structures that go with that. Then, at the same time, we hear Amazon, Pflugerville is hiring lots of people. So plenty of opportunities and plenty of across the spectrum. At the same time, in almost every single episode we've talked to, talent is being identified as the biggest challenge. How do you see the driver between that juxtaposition?
Yeah, great question. So I've been in Austin for a long time. I got here in 1990 as an exchange student in high school, and so I've seen the city grow substantially. And I remember, in 2001 when I started my first company, coming straight out of school, back then there was this big question mark as to whether Austin would be able to grow. And the biggest need that people always identify, and we have, unlike the coast, right, where you're constrained by water, and we have all the real estate in the world, we have all the sunshine in the world, we have all of the, natural resources in the world. But the question in 2001 when I came was always like, how in the world are we going to become a world-class city? Because we're this little itty-bitty town that no one knows about, and we have all these incredibly creative people, all these artists, musicians. But if we want to become a real city, quote unquote, we have to, kind of have a whole nother level of talent that we can't attract right now. It's interesting that the question is coming up now, 20 years later, because I feel like actually we have grown as a city so much over the last 20 years. It's just an unbelievable difference already. And yet there's still this talent shortage, right? And there's still kind of this need for highly talented people, because we live in a knowledge economy. Austin is a place that is, thriving on knowledge work, right? And so we have to figure out, if we want to grow the city even further, how to attract even more people. And I think that is especially important in terms of managerial talent and executive talent. Oftentimes what I've heard is that, there's all of the sort of hardworking talent at the at the level of the individual contributor here in Austin. A lot of incredibly creative people, a lot of incredibly highly motivated people, but there is a lack of sort of leadership positions. And so the more senior level people that can easily find another job, let's say in New York or San Francisco or even Dallas for that matter, are reluctant to move to Austin because what happens if it doesn't work out? What other opportunities are there for me? Now, I will say this: I think the pandemic will do absolute wonders for this city in the long term. I know it's a horrible thing that is happening still right now. Even as this podcast airs, my guess is there's still a lot of heartbreak happening. But over the long run, I think as we rethink how we are going to work as executive teams, my gut says that Austin will become really, really attractive as a destination for more senior level talent. But right now, I agree, there's still a shortage of talent, honestly, at all levels.
So when we think about that, kind of where we are in terms of getting the talent that we need, and you're saying a lot of the executive talent, are we looking at a scale issue? Like we just need, 10 times as many people here to be having this talent? Or is it there's specific skill sets that we're looking at also? If you break it down by, is it, we talk about knowledge work, right? Is it, we need more data science, we need more factory workers? Like what are we thinking about in terms of skill sets versus, we don't need the skill sets, we just need 10x the number of people in this particular area, right?
Just bring us people. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where I think we are entering with kind of sort of the post-COVID world, really a different mindset that I've seen shifted. Where previously it was like, well, we need to get everyone into Austin, and now the question is more, how do we make people collaborate, even if you have to do it online? Which I think makes the question of why Austin a very different one. Because now all of a sudden, Austin is becoming, my hypothesis is becoming more a destination of choice for people as they think, well, I can work for my company where everyone's in San Francisco. I can work remotely and I can live in this amazing city that, has everything to offer. And so my gut says that what we're going to be experiencing is probably an even greater influx of people from the coast. I mean, we're already seeing that in spades, right? Where they may not actually be working for an Austin employer, or they may start a satellite office here, right? And they may, go into a co-working space and get their team, build out their team here, even if the headquarters is somewhere else. So my gut says the next 10 years are probably going to accelerate Austin's growth even more. And I think the challenge still remains. It remains for us as a company. We have 5-6 open positions right now that we would want to fill immediately if we can find the right person. We're looking primarily in Austin because that's where we're based and that's where we have our core staff. But we're also now starting to look around the country and around the world, honestly, to see how we can augment and grow our team. But I think it is the time of the great resignation, I guess, and people are reevaluating their career options and their life choices in numbers like we've never seen before. So I know this podcast will air a little bit after we are recording it, so I'm gonna have to project where we will be in January 2022. But my guess is that trend of people stepping away from the grind, thinking about what they want to do next in life is going to accelerate. And what that means for the talent shortage, especially in a boomtown like Austin, is it's going to make it even harder for even great employers to attract the right employees. So how far that will go, I don't know, but it's a wonderful trend, I would say, for both employees who now have a lot more choices available. But I also think it's a wonderful development for a town like Austin, which, as we all know, that all of us that live here and love the city, like we all know, has so much to offer. But when there was previously, a lot of constraints that people had to work around in order to make the decision to come to the city.
Yeah, and it's funny. One of the other hats that I wear is I run strategy and business development for a life science company, not in Austin and not in Texas. So I am one of the remote workers that kind of wants to be based here and be part of the ecosystem. And it has lots of opportunities. This podcast, angel investments and things of that nature. So I totally understand, and it becomes interesting of how does that remote work become a positive force for us in the kind of the talent pool, because you have, as you said, people kind of coming here for lots of different reasons, not necessarily just job number 1, 2, or 3, right?
I think that's going to be the trend, and that's what makes me really bullish about even the future growth of Austin, right? Because now people have a lot more choices on where to live, not just where to make a living, and because of what Austin has to offer compared to, even other great cities. I feel like there's an even bigger, Austin has already been a boomtown for the last 20 years, but I think that's only going to accelerate.
Yeah, it's interesting because clearly you've talked about your talent shortage, the 5 or 6 positions you're trying to fill. We have these gaps now. We have these needs now. What would you suggest to a company when you talk to them about Abilitie? How do you suggest they balance between educating their existing talent pool, reskilling that talent pool, recruiting for the new talent pool, and even bringing in people, whether it's remotely or in person, getting them to migrate to Austin? What's that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. Partly what we have done at Abilitie, since we started in 2015, and especially with when we started the Invited MBA 2 years ago, what we really saw was this incredible need, based on the talent shortage that will only continue to grow. This incredible need for companies to upskill the existing employees that they have to the degree that allows them to become leaders in the company. Because there is no way that a company can just simply hire their way to success. A lot of times as you grow in a company, the most successful companies, when you look at the resumes of the executives, they had been there from the beginning, and they had been there in low-level roles, and they've risen through the ranks. And the reason why that I think is important is, companies are living organisms, and you can have a perfect resume for a VP of marketing. If that person doesn't fully understand the company and the company culture, and then that all of that experience is doesn't matter. And so a lot of times, growing talent from within has proven to be the best strategy for companies that are truly kind of accelerating the growth. We look at Michael Dell and the people that have made Dell successful. They started in the warehouse and then they became executives. And the problem there, and then this is sort of the problem that we're trying to solve at Abilitie, and that we're trying to solve with our Invited MBA, is it takes, it's not easy to get the leadership skills, to get the business acumen skills embedded, so that those people that used to be forklift operators can now become managers and read a P&L, right? These are not easy skills to upgrade, if you will. And traditionally, the options have been somewhat limited, right? You go to a 2-year MBA, which basically takes people out of their job. And so our mission really is to create convenient options, part-time options. The Invited MBA is a part-time program. You can do it during the workday, but we also have an option to do it after the workday. And so what allows for that to do is it allows for people to upskill in new ways using technology, right? And using what we have, what we are now all familiar with in terms of, Zoom and online learning, and using those tools, I think is going to be the only way that we can get enough people to the level that we need to get them to, because the companies are not going to be able to hire their way to success. You're going to have to up level people to those leadership roles.
Yeah. Let me put a bit of a contrarian hat on that for a second. In a prior life, I used to run a fairly large division of a financial institution. I had a couple hundred people working for me. And my argument with my leadership was always about wanting to spend money on this upskilling. And the risk to the company, at least as they perceived it, was, well, they're just going to leave. If we help them upskill, they're going to leave. Now the weirdest term that has become very common now is the Great Resignation. I've seen surveys that talk about 25, 35, 40% of people in current jobs are looking to leave that current job. How do you face that kind of burden as an employer, as a manager, and how do you look at what Abilitie does and the other portions of the educational complex to mitigate that problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course the pat answer to your first question is the quote I always love is, when people say, well, if I train them, then they will just use that knowledge and leave. And the return question to that in our industry, of course, is, well, what if you don't train them and then they stay? So that's the kind of the typical reply that I love, and I know this is well known in our industry. But I think you are right, and you're onto something really important, right? It is the Great Resignation, and it is as people are reevaluating what they want to do in life. I think what company will need to realize is that sort of in many ways we are now living in a world where every employee is their own entrepreneur. Every employee is their own boss, the boss of their own skills, the skills they bring to the table. They may not have they may not have physical assets, but they have a lot of IP that is in their heads, right? And so I feel like the traditional sort of path of the history of business, I guess, over the last few decades, if I can go very expensive here, right, is there used to be this lifelong commitment, right? So like a marriage, right? You start with IBM, you retire from IBM, and that was the marriage, right? And you chose an employer for that. And then employers abandoned that concept, right? Like, we can't marry you forever, so but we still demand loyalty, right? And which was kind of a raw deal for many employees, right? And so I think over the last, and I don't think it's just been COVID, I think it's really been building over the last 10, 20 years. Employees have said, well, wait a second, if you're not offering me a marriage contract, then I'm not married to you either, right? And so I think, and employees have then started to realize, well, hey, I'm my own brand, I'm my own, I provide skills. And I will say this, like, I think I have a good friend who is a movie producer in Hollywood, and he is of the opinion, and I think it's an interesting opinion, is that where work is going to evolve to is kind of where the movie industry is right now, which is really interesting, right? So in the movie industry, you don't have permanent employment, right? What you do is everyone has their skill set, and they bring their skill set to a project, to a movie, and you sign a contract for that movie. And if you leave in the middle of a movie, that's a crappy move, because you are, kind of in the middle of, creating something. But when the movie is done, there's a wrap party, and everyone leaves and says their goodbyes. And then the next project starts, and you start to assemble a crew again that is perfect for the job. And when I look at my wife used to work at Dell. In many ways, a company like Dell has already evolved to that, right? Where their projects, you're on the project, and then when your kind of team gets dissolved or gets bought up by another company, Dell basically says, well, go find your next job within Dell. Like, you're still fully employed. You got a few months to figure it out, but you got to find your next job. You got to find your next gig within Dell. So I feel like, or you have to leave. And so that type of model of what the movie industry is doing is already starting to happen in large corporations. And so I think for employees, what that means is you have to really think about, what are the core skills that I can bring to not just the company, but to each project that I'm working on. And I think what it means, and then make sure that you get compensated well for the job that you're doing, right? Like that's the employees, kind of, if you're on your own boss, you got to make sure you're compensated for it well. And then I think the employer's responsibility is to figure out how can I create the best possible environment for these projects to succeed. So I have a little bit of a contrarian view on the Great Resignation. I think it's kind of okay, and it's kind of a good thing, for people to think of jobs a little bit more like movie projects, because what it does is it up levels everyone to kind of tackle new challenges. It is less comfortable, right? And so there are a lot of people that don't, they love the comfort of having a lifelong job, but I think that's kind of the thing of the past anyway. And so if we're not going to be able as employers if we're not going to be able to guarantee lifelong jobs anyway, then I think we all have to sort of take care of our own careers, be our own entrepreneurial venture with the skills that we have. And it is a great resignation, is no question. But that also means there's great opportunity for companies that have something to offer jobs to new people. So we are looking for a lot of people right now, but we're also finding a lot of people who are not happy where they are at. And we're having a lot of conversations. It will require, I think, a more fluid job market than we currently have, and will require more connection mechanisms between people and jobs. So that's, I think, a missing part of that, of that world. But I guess my contrarian view a little bit is the Great Resignation, but I don't know if that's necessarily bad for either the employee or the employer to have more fluidity in the job market.
Well, and I find interesting, right? So the generational things that occur as we start this off. So it's an example I think is really interesting. So I wear, 3 different hats, and so quote unquote 3 different jobs, right? This podcast being one of them. My wife, she has a side hustle. The amount of people I know who have side hustles. And what's interesting is I remember this the other day, my oldest child, who's 8 years old, was like, when I grow up, my main job is going to be this, and then my other job is going to be this. And so the modeling that we are all doing as a society of this idea of like, yeah, you got a side hustle. You've got your point about everybody being an entrepreneur. And if he already at 8 starts thinking about, I'm going to wear multiple hats and do these kinds of things and be an entrepreneur, whether he knows that word or not, it creates a really interesting of what is that going to mean in 20 years?
That is such a great point. Yeah. And that's, I think, the younger generation, that's how they're thinking about jobs anyway. Right. And so, employers have, torn up the marriage contract. And so employees now have rightfully said, you know what, let's make this, let's make these, short-term romances. Right. And I think that's ultimately, whether we like it or not, how the world is going to be. And I completely agree. Everyone has. My wife just started a side gig, doing a travel agency on the side. It was a wonderful thing to keep her occupied in the evenings and on weekends. And I think what it does though is it also, and again, I think it's just all good developments. It forces employers to think about the value of an employee, not necessarily in terms of like, do they have their butts in the seat, right? Like, do they, are they here? But in terms of what are they doing? How are they creating value for a company? And what that does, this goes into, again, what we sort of teach with our 12-week mini MBA, right? It really forces every employee, when they are at work and when they are getting paid, to think about, well, what is the value that I'm creating here, right? Because, employers now have to think about not like, how can I just the most amount of people with the most, in the most amount of seats, right? Just to kind of have them. But really everyone has to think about, well, what is the value that they're creating at this moment for a company? And then, sometimes the way this works these days, then side hustles become full-time gigs and vice versa. And I think it's a great development, but it is unsettling, I think, when you're not trained to be ready for that. And I do think that's one of the things that I'm passionate about with Abilitie and our invited MBAs. Like, we want to address that gap, right? We want people to really feel comfortable and understand what is business about, what creates value for a business, so that when you do get into these jobs, you have actually a more nuanced understanding of what employers are looking for, right? Because I do think that's part of this new world order that we are entering. But I love the analogy. My 11-year-old he wants to be a YouTuber, and he's like, well, it doesn't need to be my main job. It's like, that's what I want to do.
There you go.
I'm like, all right.
Yeah, it sounds like a good kid. One of the things we've talked a lot about with folks in Austin is how interconnected these various industries are. And people who are in packaged goods talk to folks who are in the space kind of thing about issues that they face together. You're in a unique position because your company focuses on helping other companies succeed and thrive. So the question for you is, as Austin becomes more of an established and powerful ecosystem, how do you and how do the rest of the education industry, if you will, connect with other parts of that innovation landscape?
That's a great question as well. And I sit on the advisory board of the School for Undergraduate Studies at UT, and that comes up quite a bit, right? How does an ecosystem get created? And what always comes up, in the context of Austin, is that what really made Silicon Valley was Stanford, right? And when you think about, there would be no Silicon Valley if there hadn't been, Stanford and Xerox PARC and this symbiotic relationship between academic research and industry. And the question that always comes up when I head over to the UT campus for the advisory board meetings is, how do we get there in Austin, right? How do we create that ecosystem? And I have to say, so first of all, a lot of current Austin, for anyone that's listening that's new to Austin, I think a lot of current Austin is built on some of the same things, right? The reason why we've grown so exponentially is, because in the 70s there was the MCC, the Austin Technology Incubator. It's like probably things people don't even know about anymore, right? But there was this rich collaboration, the IC Squared Institute, all these things that were funded sometimes, from the university, sometimes private, but that allowed for that collaboration to happen. I do think there is a challenge now as we grow, that we grow so fast and so disorganized, if you will, that there aren't these central connection points. And, especially in a post-COVID world, which we still don't know how that's going to look like, how are we going to foster those connections? I don't know, but I know that if we want to have the sustained growth that I think many of us in Austin are excited about, we need to figure out what those connection points were. And when I came in 2001, there were all these networks that connected the university to industry, and there still are. So Capital Factory is a great example. There's a lot of things that connect, that provide that connective tissue, but how we go about and how much we foster that connective tissue, I think will determine how fast we grow. But I think it's dialogue and it's people, and I don't have any more insights into that than just it ultimately boils down to people willing to make the effort, right, to go over to campus and to recruit the intern, right, and to talk to that brilliant professor. And we one of our core products, one of our business leadership simulations, we commercialized out of UT. It was a simulation that was run by a professor at the University of Texas. We approached him, we're like, hey, this needs to be commercialized. We went through the Office of Technology Commercialization, and now we have a multi-million-dollar product line based on something that this professor did.
Well, you're so right. It's always about the people. We always end our podcast with our central question. Bjorn, what's next, Austin?
My God, so much, right? My guess is, repeating a little bit what I said earlier, in the post-COVID world, Austin's growth will not decelerate, but accelerate, mainly because people have more choices now around the world, and Austin is just simply a place of choice. And when you compare not just, sort of this intangible quality of vibe, but you really compare also who is here versus who are the people that choose to make a living in Dallas or Houston, and to name just a few of our competitors here in Texas. There is a level of energy and excitement that has been a core of the city ever since I set foot here when I came as an exchange student from Germany in 1990, and that is still here. I feel it all the time when I go to the events that are starting to happen, and now post-COVID, the Austin Forum events, the kind of the Austin Tech Happy Hour events. I feel that those are the types of things that are continuing to make Austin special. What my fervent hope is that the thing that drove that energy, excitement, enthusiasm was a collaborative tone that was different, markedly different from any other city. And I lived in San Francisco, New York, Washington, DC, Boston, so and Hamburg, Germany, and in Amsterdam. So I have some comparisons. There's a collaborative vibe in the city that is absolutely unparalleled. I've never seen it in any other city. The willingness to help each other out, the willingness to approach, to ask for favors, to give favors. And if we can retain that spirit, we will grow, not just in terms of number of people, which is always fun to just kind of see your city grow and have a better and more interesting skyline, I should say. But you will also grow to one of the more amazing cities in the world. That would be my hope, and that would be the task, I think, for Austin for the next 20 years.
Bjorn Billhardt, CEO of Abilitie, thank you so much for joining us on the Austin Next podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.